Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gil Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. Novak Djokovic has his first title of 2022 at last. It comes in Rome, and he beat Stefanos Tsitsipas in the final in a rematch of last year's Roland Garros final. Second straight year they've played in Rome as well, and it continues the trend that we have been highlighting throughout, which is Djokovic getting better and better throughout this clay court season. Joel, what were your thoughts on that final against Tsitsipas? Blowout in the first set, 6-love, very tight in the second with the 7-6.
Yeah, but then he got out just in time. I mean, that was a good effort. That's one of those strange scores that you don't want to have to play too many matches by because of the momentum and all the other factors. And I thought it was look how much progress Novak has made in the last few weeks. We've seen it right in front of us, and we've seen how much better he's playing. It was very impressive in how I ask a lot of players, what makes the super greats so much better than all the other players? And they have something that they do that kind of can shift the momentum or arrest it. And Novak, this thing with Novak and tiebreakers, I mean, this is a whole study. This is a study about errors and consistency and depth. I mean, it's a pretty much a master course he puts on in his way of winning tiebreaks.
I thought Tsitsipas came out really tight. And Joel, the comment you made in our last podcast about scar tissue, I thought that was really appropriate because he seemed nervous. He seemed like the last thing in the world he wanted to do was play Djokovic. He got a couple of bad bounces on the clay in like the first or second game, and it was almost as if he got it in his head that this is not going to be my day or my set. I thought Novak did a great job attacking the Tsitsipas backhand, which other players had not done as effectively, and it broke down. He coughed up a lot of errors, and then Tsitsipas found his rhythm and had an opportunity to serve for the second set. And once again, Novak persisted and forced a lot of errors. There were a couple of articles that were written on Novak's backhand, which was quite good. To me, just from the eyeball test, not really looking at any stats, I thought the forehand was amazing yesterday. And if you give Novak Djokovic an opening, he's going to take a tractor and ram right through that.
Yeah, the forehand was the key for me because he, in the first two sets at the French, and by the way, I actually probably give Novak a bit more credit. Early in that match, I thought the first three games, nothing Tsitsipas really could have done. And it was 40-15, where he was serving at 2-love, trying to just get on the board and get into the match. And he was up, and he makes a first serve, has an easy forehand. Djokovic knows exactly where it's going to go, reads it like a book, and hits a winner on the kind of the counterattack with Tsitsipas out of position, thinking that he was going to end the points on his terms. And Djokovic hits a winner. 40-30, another great first serve by Tsitsipas, or at least he lands it and hits his spot. Djokovic again gets it back. Tsitsipas has a mid-court forehand, approach shot. Djokovic anticipates cross-court pass on the backhand. He knew where he was going again. It's two forehands that it wasn't just movement. It was Djokovic read him. And I thought that just broke Steph's spirit right there. I was up 40-15. I did exactly what I was supposed to do, and Novak hit two winners. And then, yeah, I think it was a runaway train from there. He gave up. He was down two breaks. But in terms of the forehand to forehand, Djokovic was losing that battle. First two sets at the French when he went down 2-love in the final. He wasn't losing that yesterday. Mm-hmm. He was hitting just as big. He was hitting deep. He was hitting with quality. And if you can go to Tsitsipas's forehand without getting hurt, now you open up the backhand corner, right? Geometrically, that's what happens.
Well, the better player reveals the weaker player's limitations and weaknesses. And you see, I mean, Tsitsipas, I think he's having a little bit of a tennis identity crisis because now he's come up against some of the greats repeatedly and shown his stuff. And now he's kind of think, well, gee, unless I get this backhand a lot better, particularly learn how to slice it effectively, now he's going to have to do more with his forehand. And then when everything gets out of whack that way, bad things can happen. And it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to watch in Rome to see, here's Novak chugging along. And then you see Zverev and Tsitsipas. Alcaraz not there, but Alcaraz has made Tsitsipas and Zverev look to me a little bit like yesterday's news. We talked about this before. Like, I'm not saying they're not contenders. I'm just saying that the electric qualities that Alcaraz is bringing are something different. Tsitsipas and Zverev have kind of seen, oh, this is how good I can really be?
And I would put FAA in that category because he had a really great tournament and played a great match against Novak. But I know that some of the scouting on how to potentially beat Novak is to keep the ball deep to the middle so that he cannot open up the court and find angles. And I saw Tsitsipas trying to do that in spots, but he looked unsure. And the balls that he was hitting straight up the middle, hard and deep, didn't really have the commitment that his cross-court forehand or cross-court backhand had. So he just looks unsure. And Djokovic seems to have learned a lot from last year's French Open final. And Tsitsipas seems as confused as ever. So he's got some work to do in the next week. And he had a tremendous clay court season, but it's not even close at this particular point in time. But that doesn't mean he can't gather himself. It's just the greatness of Djokovic is still very much in play here.
Well, I don't think Tsitsipas conceives of tennis as something you have to kind of tactically adjust to. I think for him, it's about being expressive and hitting cross-court shots and big forehands and angles and coming to net. So if you told him, all right, here's what you got to do. You got to kind of slice down the middle to his forehand, keep it down the middle, wait for your thing, jockey, thrust. I mean, and in an odd way, because of the way he plays, Zverev might be more equipped to do that in his own way because he's not as much seeing tennis as creation the way Tsitsipas is. So it's for someone who's used to lashing balls out to corners and making athletic plays. Now you're turning it into kind of like a bowling alley for Tsitsipas, and that Novak is completely comfortable in all of that. He understands all those corners of the game that way. But I think Stefanos, I'm not quite sure if he's ready for that kind of cognitive shift.
Well, I know that he does use data. He does have someone on his team, or actually a couple of people on his team that do advanced scouting for him. But to what degree that is integrated into his overall approach, who knows? Maybe you have a point, like he's a little more like Shapovalov right now than he is like Novak.
That's right.
I'd rather give him more credit though. I mean, he problem solved in the second set. All of the serves in the first set went to Djokovic's forehand. Novak was demolishing them. He was eating them for breakfast. Tsitsipas might as well in the first set have started the point with the hand feed the way Novak was returning. But in the second set, he starts going to the backhand and hitting more kick. And he actually serves really, really well. And then, the second part of this is he served for the match when they played last year in Rome. He was up 2-0 in the French final last year. And, this one was a little bit more lopsided, but he's losing. He's lost, I think, all 4 meetings to Novak on clay, but I don't think he's getting, I don't know that it's not close. I just think he's not there.
Yeah. So I just will throw this in. This is like, I talked to a coach the other day that was giving me his opinion on Tsitsipas. And he said that the one big thing that he sees with Tsitsipas on his serve, which to my eye is excellent and statistically it's excellent, but he says that Steph leans to the left so that when he's done with his serve, he's in an awkward position, particularly to find the forehand. I mean, Steph does great with the +1 forehand, but that was just an interesting comment from a high-level coach.
I like that comment, and I think it's a result of the toss. I mean, because the most is going to carry him to his left anyway. he's gonna go, the racket's gonna go across the body that way, but it's not as organized as, let's say, Federer or Djokovic. And so the ability to spring to that side, obviously he wants to play the forehand, and the toss seems to get him it's a little strange sometimes with that motion. I mean, it doesn't mean he doesn't serve well. It doesn't mean, but maybe it has to do with the points. And again, it's in such thin margins, so subtle at that high level.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be worse. He used to go off to the left more than he does now. And now it's still there. It's also interesting though, because I've heard others, and I don't I'm like you, Amy, and to a certain extent, when I need to know anything about technique, I go to other people. I know people who have said Tsitsipas is exposed down the line, or to his forehand side, but it actually helps him get forehands because he falls to his left.
Yeah, you're springing that way, but
right.
I don't know. I'd have to almost like go out on a court and intentionally fall to the left to try to figure it out, because
it's allowing him to get more inside out forehands.
If you watch his split step after his serve, it's always like on the deuce side, he's split stepping on his backhand side, because that's where he goes after he serves. And I think that's actually a good thing. He kind of wants to be there, unless someone's going to hit a good return down the line and he's going to struggle to return cover it.
Okay. So Joel, you're saying that you think we've kind of gone off the rails here, but that's okay.
Right.
That's what we do on this podcast.
We've got a little off balance.
So Joel, are you saying that his toss is a little bit more over his head?
I think it's a little more than over his head. I think it's a little more like 11 o'clock or 10:45.
Behind him.
It's one thing when you do it as a kick serve to serve and volley, but I think it also it gives him. When I watch him serve and finish his serve, he seems to be landing off balance, regardless of where the step is. It's not intentionally, as opposed to you watch someone like Novak, when he finishes his serve, regardless of where his toss is, he's kind of where he's balanced. And then when the more balanced you are, and again, we're talking split second adjustments, with the split second adjustment being able to make a forehand that run and cover a forehand that you can then hit a foot inside the baseline compared to 2 feet inside the baseline. And at that level, it makes a big difference.
I like your word organized. That's like one of my favorite words in tennis, because it can be like, if you're ever out on the tennis court where, you're just diving for a ball or something and you're a hot mess, your body is not organized. Right. That's a great word.
Yeah. Still the big hole to me is just the backhand side and how it can be attacked, both with its defensive shortcomings, which I think Djokovic definitely exposed in this match when it comes to going there with pace and taking time away, and how does it react when he's on the run and when he's rushed, and also just in neutral trading, the consistency and the solidness. And Tsitsipas made 3 unforced errors on the backhand in the tiebreak, and Novak was tight. And that is where I would be critical of Tsitsipas, because I think Djokovic played a great match, first set, second set. Tiebreak, Steph's got to be better, because Novak was tight. He was pushing to the backhand, and he wasn't doing that all match. That was not his tactic. That was, I'm too nervous to go to the forehand, with enough.
Yeah, but it's like, why not? And what Tsitsipas doesn't know how to do is how to use a backhand. Like, again, the backhand slice technique for a player that good is not particularly good slice technique. And so he doesn't know how to use it to generate, whether it's neutral or get Novak to hit the ball less hard, all the things that a slice backhand can accomplish. I can think of about 10 former pros who Tsitsipas spent a week with that guy. He'd learn a little bit more about the technique of how to move through it instead of kind of hack at it.
Enquist has made some strides, I think, and I haven't seen him in a bit, but I think the slice immediately got better once he got some new advice on the technique. It is weird, though, for a top 5 player. It feels like he's been getting the wrong advice on the technique of his backhand slice for a lot of years now, which is kind of crazy.
Well, I think he enjoyed lashing and crashing and angles and driving and whipping. And look, guys won Monte Carlo 2 years in a row. Been to the French Open finals. Gone pretty good.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, hack is not a fun word, but sometimes you do want to carve it a little bit more, or sometimes you're going for something shorter or something like that. And it may be like what we were talking about before, that he's just more of an expressor or a feeler. And it may be that it's not that he's trying to flout the advice or that he's gotten bad advice. It may just be that it hasn't come to him yet, that particular shot. But these guys are all very dynamic and they're capable of making the changes.
I think for every player, there's certain shots that they have to figure out, that have to understand what they're meant to accomplish for them. And I think for certain players, a shot can be perceived, well, oh, wow, isn't that just defense? Am I defense? Am I not doing what I should be doing? And I think the player has to have the epiphany, working with the coach or whoever else, to see, oh, I see, this sequence can work for me. Doing it this way, like Ivan Lendl had a chip and a drive early in his career, but he hadn't learned to make the chip quite as effective as he needed to. And then once he did, he started to have much better results against his lefty opponents, Connors and McEnroe. So it's just a question of how you see how that works. And maybe if Tsitsipas plays a match versus Novak and sees how it gains him traction and rallies, he'll see it, because it is kinesthetic. It can't just be abstract. In the meantime, look, he's beating 97% of the people he plays.
Yeah. I mean, look, the topspin backhand can be better too. The drive can be better too. There's no doubt about that for me. I mean, I just think and also getting some information from Jim Courier when he was commentating in Australia about how Stefanos has taught the slice, and just the technical philosophy that he has been given as a young player, which is from Apostolos. And I've also seen the practice sessions in person, and that he's been workshopping that shot vigorously for 2 years. I have seen that. There has been no neglecting of slice. There has been no lack of desire for that to be better. I just think he hasn't had the right teacher until he let Thomas Enquist in the garage, and it got immediately better. That's kind of my read on the situation.
Well, also, I think people, I've just thought of Justine Henin as an example. When you learn the drive one-hander on clay, you have the extreme Eastern grip, like Stan Wawrinka, like Justine, and you can really get over, and you can then get significant racket head speed on the topspin drive. So then, but to get the slice, you could want to get a little more continental and have it sort of mildly transitional, like the way people learn to hit the slice and drive on faster courts. And that's how I was taught it. I mean, and Gil, from when we've played, I'm a recreational player, so I'm not going to overcook this. But I think people who learn to play a one-hander on faster courts, they might not be as dialed into the extreme Eastern grip. You see how far over he gets on that backhand. I know this is very crunchy tennis stuff, but you see he gets way over on that, and that becomes harder to see and deploy the slice from there.
Yep. Good point.
Okay, 3, a show about the USPTA backhand.
Yeah, I'd fail that test.
Quickly circling back to something you led with, which is the tiebreak for Novak. And I mentioned Tsitsipas missed the 3 neutral backhands that I thought were pretty unacceptable misses at the time. But it was another example of Novak refusing to make an unforced error. And he didn't in the tiebreak. He made 1 actually on the forehand, but didn't make a lot of mistakes, even though he was super tight. I just pulled up the numbers after you said it. Djokovic was 19-2 in tiebreaks in 2021.
Wow.
Isn't that insane? And now he's only 4-4 this year, but now he's on a 2 tiebreak win streak. He won both of them that he played in Rome.
19-2 in 2021. I mean, that is just, and of course, we'll always remember the 3 he won versus Federer when he won the Wimbledon final. I mean, that's just, and there's something, I mean, that's a real learning. It's not saying that's how everybody should play tie breaks, but it's certainly the way he knows he should play tie breaks. And that says a lot about Novak. I mean, that says a lot of what makes him so great. And when you think of the topic like great players and when you'd want to play for the fate of the earth, I mean, I've often had people like Nadal, Pancho Gonzalez, Jimmy Connors, but boy, Novak, make a case for Novak.
That must terrify. If anyone thinks about that, any one of his opponents, or if they get wind of it, that is the last statistic that you want to know going into to play Novak. Like, what can I do to avoid a tiebreak? And if I do have to go to a tiebreak, this guy is so money. I mean, if you could choose one particular superpower to have in tennis, ability, amazing ability and tie breaks would have to top the list. I mean, that is an unbelievable statistic.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
It goes back to something we discussed a ton throughout 2021, which is ability to play as well as you possibly can and better than your opponent, ideally, with nerves and pressure. And that's just what I think he's so good at. It's handling the nerves and pressure, I think, the best of our three. But speaking of the matter, Amy, you wrote a piece about Djokovic potentially having an opportunity to cement his legacy as potentially the second best clay court player of all time with more results, right? So
yes.
He's not there yet, but you think he has the opportunity to do that.
You actually had to click through and read the article to catch that. I actually didn't put him at 2 ... yet. But there was, it blew up on Twitter and people are arguing about it. And the headline is he the second best ever ? And I just take you through some numbers briefly. Obviously, Bjorn Borg has more Roland Garros titles. He's got a better winning percentage on clay, and he's got more clay court titles. And oh, by the way, there's no argument about number one. I mean, pretty much all of Rafa's accomplishments on clay just absolutely dwarf anybody else's. So put that aside. Rafa's number one, and nobody's going to catch him, at least probably not in our lifetime. So that leaves, who is number two. And the interesting thing about Borg is that he retired early. So he's got this supreme body of work in a very short amount of time. Well, that, to me, because I know how hard tennis is and I know the grind, that's actually maybe a mark against him, because Novak has had to rally himself from these lulls in motivation, and yet he continues to do it, and he continues to play into his mid-30s, and I think that says something for him.
I agree with that. I like that, I guess, because I'm a little bit more of a hare than a tortoise, and I like the longevity approach. I mean, Borg played Roland Garros 8 times, but he did win it the 6 of the 8 times he played it, and but he last played it the last time he played it was the month he turned 25. And here's Novak, who's just turning 35 next week. And Novak's played it 15 times already. Now, the way I look at the rankings, because I don't like to list, I like to triage. So I put at the A+ clay guys, I will put Nadal and Borg. I'll put them as kind of the A+ grouping. And then there are a whole bunch of A's. And one of the things I think that's interesting in clay court tennis, Borg kind of revolutionized clay court tennis. There weren't really as many clay court specialists until Borg came around with which is sort of the ancestor of today's game, the Western forehand, the two-handed backhand, heavy emphasis on topspin. And then a lot of the people who won Roland Garros, that was the slam they won. Thomas Muster, Albert Costa, Kuerten, who won it 3 times. That was Michael Chang, Juan Carlos Ferreira. That was the slam they won. And so it's kind of like narrow casting. And then the game changed, Nadal and Federer. It's like, oh, the clay guy is kind of an all-court guy. The clay guy wins other slams now too. So I think with Novak, my thinking after I read your article, Amy, I thought, how does Novak get to the A+ group? And to me, this is the number. When you win 4, if he wins 4 titles at Roland Garros, that put 4 titles along with the many finals he's reached. I lost track of how many finals he's reached. That's a pretty darn good clay. And that vaults him past some of the 3-time RG winners such as Lendl, Mats Wilander, Kuerten. So that's how I kind of see it for Novak, and that's possible. I mean, that's within reach. I mean, it's funny, he's of our 3, Novak appears the most physically indestructible. younger.
For sure.
Yes.
And so more likely to have more looks at that tournament. So to me, putting Novak in the A+ Roland Garros guys is, get to 4, win 4. 3, not sure, and then we'll see what the rest of the career is. But 4, pretty darn good. Gil, what are your thoughts around all this?
I like that number. I like the 4. My thoughts, though, I keep thinking about what it means to be successful on clay nowadays with surface speed homogenization, with primarily baseline tennis and the modern game. I'm someone who's I minimize, I guess, a little bit the difference between the surfaces, in the sense that I think a great player today is going to be is going to be great on all 3 surfaces. And that's, something that I was saying going into Roland Garros last year with Daniil Medvedev, which I think is the best way to kind of understand my viewpoint on it. Medvedev, you know how I feel, he wasn't competing on clay because he was upset throughout the clay court season about the prospect of playing on it. But if he actually tries and puts his mind to it, I think he's a top 10 clay court player. Well, he's a top, let's say 3 player. Forget surfaces, top 3 player. So clay, okay, it might bump him down to, okay, maybe he's the 6th best in the world, besides behind Zverev and Tsitsipas, and let's say Alcaraz and Nadal, right? But Medvedev, is he good on clay? That's a weird question. No, right? That your instinct is to say no. Bad on clay. Probably the 6th or 7th best clay court player in the world. So I think it's important to kind of look at Djokovic as a clay courter as well. His game is going to work the same game that he plays. It's going to work on all the surfaces. Borg didn't have that. And I think that's the difference, kind of.
Wait. You mean
right?
5 Wimbledons?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying Borg had to change, right? Wasn't that so amazing about what Borg was doing, is he was playing a completely different style?
You're getting that. Well, yeah, the surfaces were a lot less homogeneous. The clay was a lot slower and the grass was a lot faster. You're right.
And I'm not saying that makes Borg better. I'm just saying it makes it different.
It's different. That's what's interesting. And that's what's kind of, and again, I say the thing about the 4 and I say the thing about the A+. And that's kind of like my way of kind of wedging into the acceptance of the quantitative data as an evaluation of players, because then it's so tricky. And a lot of players weren't playing the French then. I mean, Connor didn't play the French Open 5 times at the height of his career. And there are many reasons for that I won't get into now. But yeah, the surfaces and the commitment of players, and also to look at the slam tally, the engagement of players, let's say prior to 1988 with the Australian Open, was a lot less. I think Borg played the singles there once in Australia. So the chance to have these at bats. So I think the numeric tally, I'm going to always look, how do we synthesize quantitative with qualitative? So we're getting some insight here.
Exactly. And I will go ahead and tell you that in my opinion, Novak's not there yet. So Borg is still number 2. So please keep that in mind. But I did want to just present a couple of food for thought type of arguments. And on the Twitter discussion, our friend Owen, who writes for Popcorn Tennis, I think, which is a really fun blog, he tweeted, Borg's competition just does not have the same shine to it. And Owen actually posted some of the brackets, and Joel, even you would be hard pressed to remember some of these people, and that's saying a lot. So then Owen retweets, no disrespect to Victor Pecci Sr., but he is not exactly Nadal. And the thing that makes a point in Novak's favor is that he has had to play Nadal in his prime. And he is the guy who's beaten Nadal 8 times on clay, including twice at Roland Garros. So that is just a little tick in his favor as we continue to watch Novak throughout his career.
I'm gonna tell Owen, I'm gonna say, hey, wait a sec. It's like, I don't like, it's funny. It's an interesting thing that happens in the evaluation of players. We got the ones for the slam guys. And then when we want to make our case for them versus today, we then, well, see, Borg was playing McEnroe and Connors. And look, and Rafa was beating, Del Puerta in the final. So it's always this kind of like reverse history. Borg, as I was thinking in my head, I think in his 6 Roland Garros finals, I think he beat future Hall of Famers in the majority of them. I mean, and Victor Petri in that Roland Garros run happened to beat Vilas and Connors, who are both Hall of Famers. So I'm not going to just take this kind of like.
Good point, Joel. Point to you.
The weaker competition angle. The weaker others, it's kind of like everybody will acknowledge the very greats who win. And then depending on what they're advocating for, they'll go to town on the non-slam winning rivals and say, oh, well, this guy, and this guy's not Nadal. Well, wait a second. Borg came from 2 sets to love down the second time he won the French Open. And I don't care who you're playing, you win just like Novak beat Tsitsipas. So, then it gets into the comparison of the resumes of the contenders. And then it gets into the whole absolute ball striking, which is not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about watching the tape and seeing how Borg would hit the ball compared to Tsitsipas. We're talking about greatness in its great time. So I'm going to just kind of, I'm going to kind of not buy that
abstain. Yeah. And one more thing that I'll leave it just in Borg's favor is that he has the record for consecutive sets won at Roland Garros that even Rafa could not break. And that is 41 consecutive sets.
Yeah. I just want to say, I'm not into the comparing the competition either, really, because first of all, if Borg would have lost to those guys, well, then maybe we would have regarded them as higher. I don't know what we want him to do because he beat them all, right? Whereas Djokovic has lost a lot at the French to Nadal in so many of those finals that he played between 2012 and 2014, right? Just as one of the stretches, right? We know the history between those two. I don't know. Borg can't do anything about that, right? So I never like to penalize players for their competition.
And then you could say that Djokovic lost to Cecchinato, and in 25 years, will we be saying Cecchinato? Who's that?
We will be saying that.
I think our evaluation of surfaces, I think the role starting in 2001, 2002 of 32 seeds to surface homogenization, that's going to be an important thing to just understand as we look at the history of tennis. So we need to see how the game evolves. Is this pretty much we're going to be in for the next few decades, and we don't know, and what's going to happen. I'm starting to wonder when I think about this, if through the 80s and 90s, Roland Garros was kind of the outlier slam, the specialization slam for the Serge Brugueras and the Moosters. Is that becoming the US Open? Because of the time of year, everybody starts off with the equal shot at Australia. The French and Wimbledon are kind of like, there's kind of a certain kind of alignment to them now. It's not that aberrational for a guy to win both.
Joel, it 100% is. I mean, recently, last 5 years, very much so, it totally is. I mean, look at the surprise winners in the big 3 era. Del Potro, Cilic, those were the big ones. Okay, they both did it.
Wawrinka, and then and Medvedev. You're right. So it's kind of like
and team.
So for years, I remember putting together some information that said the French, my only slam. It's like the slam the guy won. But now I'm wondering, wow, that's the US. That seems like the US Open for many reasons. Not just and maybe not so much the surface as much as maybe the time of year and where the players have deployed their bodies.
Or the ball that's a different ball. And there are a lot of women, I think, that would fit into that category, including potentially Emma Raducanu, as it, if you want to argue that the US Open is maybe a specialty slam. That's really interesting. Hadn't thought of that.
What I like most, Amy, about the fact that you went into that piece with Djokovic is that it drew attention to the idea that from a legacy standpoint, he certainly has an opportunity to really cement himself with the Roland Garros titles in terms of what it does for him reputationally as a player, because of how much success he's had on grass and hard court when it comes to the slams at the very least. He really does. That is a big opportunity. If he's able to add a couple of French Open titles, it really would do a lot, I think, for how he would be looked at as a complete all-surface player that he already certainly is, but it would just be taken to new heights. So,
well, if your worst slam is when you win 4 times,
that's something, right?
It's pretty good. But it's just interesting how the increasing data. It's just increasing data. It's not inflation. It just means, it's just staggering again. I mean, this is a very rationale for our show existing, is that guys who are well past double digits in slam wins. It's just unbelievable.
Well, next time we will get together, the Roland Garros draw will be out, and it will be interesting. Nadal is not a top 4 seed. Alcaraz is not a top 4 seed. So it does feel like a lot is riding on the draw potentially, and we will be there to discuss it. That'll do it for this episode of 3. We're available on all podcast platforms. We really appreciate it if you leave a rating and a review on Apple. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you next time on the next episode of 3.